Hello, folks. I'm Ed Overstreet. Welcome to the Night Sky Imaging YouTube channel. I'm going to be covering gain and offset, and it's not going to be the technical physics behind what determines gain and what gain is actually doing uh, in capturing electrons, but it's just really the foundation of my decision making uh, when I'm imaging a given night, a given target with given scene conditions, and what goes behind my thinking and how to make those settings work for me. So I want to first give a shout out to ZWO cameras. I love them. I'm going to be demonstrating this using a ZWO camera, but this applies really to most all CMOS cameras. So with that being said, let's head over to the ZWO website. Okay, if you are an owner of a camera manufactured by ZWO, you've been to their support page, software to download their drivers. Uh, Really, this is the only driver you need to own to run the ZWO camera, but I also have downloaded the SCOM driver for the ZWO camera, the filter well, and in other devices I don't have, like Focuser and so forth. But those drivers you do need for use of the ZWO cameras. And now let's head over to the actually, before we do that, let me minimize this and bring up Sequence Generator Pro. Let me go back to ZWO and disconnect this camera. And now let's go back to Sequence Generator Pro. And I have the ZWO driver. This is not the native driver. This is the SCOM driver currently up. My choice of cameras that I use are, the drivers are here, with the exception I use Nikon, well it is here, Nikon camera, but these are the native drivers. And so right now I have the ZWO driver up, and I want to connect the camera, and I want to look at the driver information, and you can see there are two settings. Actually, this doesn't work for whatever reasons, I don't know, but to enable the dew heater, you just go ahead and enable it with the software, but it's there for a reason, I just don't know why. But you can change the gain and the offset of your camera using this driver. And you can also, if you disconnect the camera, switch drivers. And let's go to the native driver. Let's connect, and let's open up the driver information. By the way, if you are opening this for the first time, the advanced button will not be checked. In order to access the offset, you have to check this. And you'll also have access to the USB limit for bandwidth passing through your USB 3 cable. And it says here, please turn down the USB limit if no images are being obtained. So if you're having download problems, you'll probably want to try dropping this some. It will be slower, but they'll download. And so you might sacrifice a little speed, but you got to capture your images. So at any rate, just make note that when you first open the driver, if you want to make adjustments to the offset, you can't without first clicking on Advance. They have several presets, and low gain, whatever that means, middle gain, and high gain. And so you can see what's happening down here when you pick high gain. For this particular camera, which is the ASI 174 camera, the high gain is at 240. The middle gain is at 179, which is unity. I'll go ahead and tell you what that's supposed to be. And then the low gain is 0. So we have 0, 179, and 240. Those are the three gain options. And you can manually, in fact, as soon as you start moving this slider, this changes to manual. You can manually make changes anywhere in between. But unless you check advanced, you can't make changes to offset, because let's go back to low gain. If you choose low gain, automatically ZWO sets the offset to 90. If you choose middle gain, 90. High gain, 90. So if you have an ASI error, automatically your gain, regardless of what it is, has an offset of 90. And I reached out to Sam with ZWO and wanted to know why that control feature wasn't available. And he said because it's a very complex layer of understanding that's needed before you use it. And honestly, I don't know that it's any more complex than gain, nor is it any more complex than some of the other things we're doing, but that's their reason for taking access away to the from the user for offset. How important is that? In the grand scheme of things, it's probably not very important. But there can be and would be some pixels lost, some data lost with offsets that aren't correct. And we're going to kind of look at that. But at any rate, let's, now that we know how to access the driver, and whether you're using Backyard EOS or Astrophotography Tool or Nina, whatever acquisition software you have, I happen to use Sequence Generator Pro, then you have the option of looking at your driver specs, and you should have the option, as I do here, of changing the offset and the gain. So let's move over to SharpCap, and that's here. Oh, let me get back to Sequence Generator Pro and disconnect the camera. Now let's open up SharpCap, and let's look at gain and offset. I want to connect this camera, the 174, and clear up something. Now first, if you want to run this test, it's really not a test. If you're interested in knowing what the best settings are for your CMOS camera, download FireCapture or SharpCap. Those are two pretty good software or programs. SharpCap, the non-pro version is probably all you need, and that's free. But you want a histogram that reflects what's going on with your image. And so I have this histogram option right up here, and I'm going to click on it. And I want to make sure logarithmic has been checked. And I want to cap my camera. My camera that I'm using has a cap on it so that it'd be as though I was taking dark frames, so no light can get in. And I want to set the exposure at the fastest exposure that this camera is capable of taking, which is 1/320th, 1/300th of a second, 1/3200th of a second. No, can't get it. That's as fast as this camera and all ZWO cameras are capable of taking. And in this case, we want to talk about two terms. If you have a ZWO camera, there's not an option for offset, but brightness and offset are exactly the same. So just substitute offset for the brightness, and that comes under image control. Under camera control is where you set your exposure and your gain. So let's use the gain and offset combination that ZWO recommends, which is an offset of 90. So let's put this in. And now the gain of 0 is the low gain, or the gain for the highest dynamic range. And what we mean with highest dynamic range is that you're going to get pixels, the best spread of pixels from the brightest to the darkest. How many stops will that cover? Probably 12 stops of light, or perhaps even more. And when you move the gain further to the right, or you're raising it, then you're going to lose some dynamic range. You may be going into 11 stops or 10 stops of light, which means your contrast is going to be sacrificed to some extent. So in this case, we have an offset of 90 and a gain of 0. The question is that a good combination? This is the offset they're talking about. The space between 0 value, where your darks are going to be clipped, and where this histogram begins. This space is the offset. And when you raise the offset to 90, you're moving this histogram to the right. If I move this offset further to the right, then I'll be moving the offset further to the right. And when I'm doing that, I'm going to be losing those pixel values from here to where they would be clipped. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to lower, from my standpoint, from the way I'm imaging, if I'm going after the very highest dynamic range, and let's suppose I'm imaging the trapezium in Orion, which is so easily blown out, then I may choose to bring the gain down to 0, or perhaps 10, and then I'm going to lower the brightness or offset to where I have an offset, but I don't have any lost data. So in this case, I'm down to 30, and I stand to gain and increase more dark pixels, more dark data, more dark signal, because I have a lower offset. So what I'm looking at now relative to this camera is that if I have a 0 gain, then I want an offset around 30. Can I get by with, say, 25? I doubt it. Nope. I'm actually now up against the wall. So 30, probably, I've been here before, is pretty much the low end for gain 0 for this camera, the 174. Is it the same for the 1600 or my 183? Nope, it's not. And so they're all different. Now, keeping the exposure at the very fastest in order to establish the parameters for gain and offset. Let's say I want to now go up to 179, which is unity gain for this camera. Will that offset work? No, because I am definitely now clipping some of my dark data that's coming in. So I'm losing contrast. And because I'm losing that dark, your contrast is coming from your very darks and your very brights. And so I want to move this to the right, but how far to the right? I want an offset, and I'm looking at this offset, which is the space begin from where this histogram starts to where I have clipped data. And that offset right now takes me to about 55. Let's see if 55 will work. 55 is good. So at a unity gain of 179, I don't want an offset of 90. I want an offset of 55. And then I think I'm up here to 220. I forget exactly what that was. But I told you I don't like to shoot more than 200, so let's just go 200. I can still keep my offset at 50. No, I'm having some issues. So let's raise this up just a little more to 70. Let's go back to 65. Again, I want to push this to the right only enough that I'd have an offset that allows for all of my dark data to be recorded and not lost. I don't want zero value pixels, period. So now I have decided on a gain of 200. I'll have a offset of 65. So that's how you can determine what offset best works with what gain with your camera, provided it's a CMOS camera. CCD cameras will not have an offset option. All right, now let's just talk, and let me head back to not sequence generator, but I can't even find where I'm going here. Hang on just a minute. Just go back to me. And where am I? Hang on. Okay. If I go outside and I see a clear, dark sky, stars just look awesome, and my scene conditions from the different apps that I use point to good scene. The jet stream is barely moving, and I'm going to be shooting towards the zenith, from 60 degrees to 60 degrees all night long. Then I'm probably going to shoot with a gain somewhere around unity or lower. And I'm going to be chasing dynamic range at the expense of speed. Now, speed's important to me because I do not have a high-end mount. I have a consumer grade Skywatcher HEQ6 mount. I have two of them. They're on permanent piers. They stay up all the time. And if my guiding is as predictable as it normally is when the scene is real good, I'm going to have an RMS value of 0.1 or slightly under. I might get down to 0.60, but my best guiding is going to be between 0.60 and, say, 1.2 RMS. I'm referring to combined RMS, RA, and DEC. So if I've got those kind of scene conditions and my guiding is doing pretty well, then I can take long exposures. And long exposures into the 3 and the 5 and perhaps even 10-minute range allows me to chase dynamic range, the dynamic, lost my train of thought here. The dynamic range. So I'm going to be headed to the left with my gain. I'm going to be going down towards 0. I may even try a gain of 10 and an offset of 30, which I think we talked about earlier, working pretty well. And that means that I've got good seeing, I've got good guiding, I can take long exposures in a reasonable Bartle 5 sky in my backyard, inside this, well, just outside the city limits of a modest sized town. And that's what I'm thinking. Now, I have clouds have gone away. I've got a clear sky night coming up. But like almost every first night after a bad run, that first night, always the scene is pitiful. The atmosphere is still struggling. And let's also say I'm going to be imaging, in order to get what I want in, my horizon, like the Dolphin Nebula. I want to shoot that, but the highest that's going to be is going to be maybe 35 degrees. So I'm going to get it at about 22, 23, and it's going to go to 30, 35, and it's going to go back to 20, 23. So I'm going to be shooting low in the horizon. And that always brings on itself some issues with light pollution. So I want a faster exposure. I want to get my data and get another set and another set and get as much as I can. So at the expense of dynamic range, I'm going to head to the right with my gain, and I may push it up to maybe go to 200. And I'm going to adjust my offset so that I don't lose any dark data coming in by shifting my histogram to the point where there's that little offset between the left barrier and where my histogram starts. So then I got to consider how bright the target is. Is it a bright target like Andromeda? And I can get by with, I don't have to have those long exposures. I can get by with a very short exposure, even in good seeing conditions. And I may just make my adjustments towards the higher dynamic range, because what I want to accomplish, I want the highest dynamic range I can given my seeing conditions, given the brightness of the target, and I want to make sure my offset accommodates all of those dark pixels so that I don't lose anything, and that's it. It isn't any more complex to me than setting the offset so I don't lose dark pixels and adjusting my gain given the sky, the brightness, the seeing, and my guiding. And if I got it all going on, yay, then my dynamic range is going to be the subject and the object of my gain settings. But if things aren't looking good, my guiding's looking like a saw on a lumber cutting tree, then I'm going to chase the shorter exposure so I don't have to throw away subs due to oblong stars and trailing. So goodbye dynamic range. Forget noise. It used to be that when you shot CMOS type sensors, you raised the gain, raised the ISO, you traded that for noise. You got more signal, but you got more noise. And we talk about the signal to noise ratio. Well, it exists. But we got noise management software in our processing skills and tools that makes that no longer a huge issue. We got to get signal. We're chasing signal, and we're chasing the highest dynamic range we possibly can get. So one other thing you're going to have to consider, and that sums things up from my end, is filters. Filter's not going to change the offset. It's going to change your exposure, though. Exposure's not going to change the offset. Given a certain gain, that offset's the same. Exposure's just going to open up, if you will, brightness levels, depending on which way you go with it. So forget the noise. Identify what offsets work with the gain that you choose to use. Good scene, bad scene, bright target, faint targets. Now don't go charging after dark nebula with a gain of 0, unless you're prepared to take 20-minute exposures. So it's that kind of thinking that you really got to get into, and that will, I think, help you kind of guide some of the decisions you're going to make. I really feel like I've botched this thing up, so I don't edit these videos. I say I don't. I put 2 videos together before where I was outside and I had a GoPro and then I came back in and did what I did inside, and then I put it together. That's the only editing I do. And I'm an editor. I'm a photographer by profession, and I edit video all the time, but I don't edit these. These are, you can tell. You don't need to be, nobody has to point out that these things are edited. If it did, it'd be a lot cleaner. I wouldn't say offset when I meant gain, or gain when I meant offset, or up when I meant down, or down when I meant up. So at any rate, if you get anything out of this, good. If you didn't, you didn't. And we just got to know each other just a little bit better. So I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. By golly, I plan on having one. I got to go shoot a basketball game tonight. I'm not excited about doing that because it's pouring down, raining outside. But I'm going to do it anyway. So y'all do good. Love you, people. Have a good time. Clear skies, your neck of the woods.